Great, hopefully you finished watching this video. Let's move on now. So in summary from the video, the delay plays a copy of the sound, adds a delay or an echo effect at the interval of 500 milliseconds, and it continues to repeat until the end of the track. Feedback is another effect. In fact, it would be an EarSketch would be another parameter that affects how copies continue over time and decrease in volume. You can't increase in volume. You can only decrease in volume. So we also learned some math to calculate the proper delay time to put into our program if we wanted to get to be set on the tempo. In other words, every time there's a beat. So first we got to know the beats per minute, and that's done in our set tempo in our setup function in our EarSketch. So normally it's 120. Seconds in minutes is 60 seconds, unless you live somewhere else, but minutes is usually 60 seconds. A beat is seconds in minutes divided by beats per minute. 60 over 120 gives us a half a second. So in terms of milliseconds, because EarSketch needs milliseconds, that would be the beat times 1,000, which would be 500 milliseconds. Now you could put this in as a variable based upon the 120 set as a variable and calculate it that way. Every time you change the tempo, it would change this, so it's always on the beat. Something to think about, that you don't always want to hard code numbers into your code. You want to end up using variables as much as possible, so that way if you change one thing, it kind of changes everything, as opposed to having to go ahead and change every single instance of this calculation in order to figure out what the beats per millisecond is just because you changed the tempo. So let's look at some EarSketch code. And this is inside of Blackboard, the sample code, if you would like to copy it and put it into EarSketch. First, we have some music set up. There's our setup files up here, our ... Then we have some music set up. We have some 8-bit Atari synth and an Atari pad and some drums. And these is all of our going to be music. And then we have our fit media setting up everything with our different tracks. The thing that we're interested in is actually just track 1. That's where we're going to add the effect. So the effects go down here on set effect. It's the delay effect. The first effect is affecting the delay time, and it's going to be at 500 milliseconds. So it adds a delay echo effect at intervals of 500 milliseconds. Then the second effect deals with the delay feedback. And we're going to decrease that by 20 every time. So it lowers the relative amount of repeats. By default, it's -3, but we're going to do it as -20. And you can get an interesting sound. And we'll play with those values as we look at the code and dive in. You cannot make this a positive number. You'll get an error if it's a positive number. You can't make the sound louder. You can only make it lower. So let's take a look at and see what this is in EarSketch. So in EarSketch, we have written the code here, and let me move my head out of that. And we can see that we have all of our music in, and I've commented out the delays. When I run it, this is the sound that I get. This is my track 1, and then my track 2 is my pad, and then my track 3. So let me hear it. That's really loud. So you can hear what it sounds like. I have it on a loop. So let's restart it, and let's put in some of our effects. So first, we're going to put in the delay time, and we said 500 milliseconds, and run that. And we're going to hit play. Let's listen to see what that sounds like. So you can bypass that effect rather than commenting it out. You can just hit the bypass on a DAW, and you can turn the effect on and off just to kind of play with it and hear what it sounds like. So here's with it, without, with it, without. Okay, so now let's go in and add in the other effect. This is the delay feedback, which reduces the volume for every time the song repeats. This is a little bit harder to hear, but we're going to run it and we'll see if we can hear the differences. So now you can see I have the delay time and the delay feedback. They're both in there. And let's bypass, well, we'll play both from the start. So I'm going to bypass the effect, see if you can hear the difference. So I'm going to click it back on. So it's kind of hard to hear the difference in that, and I think part of that is because the delays are so short, it's kind of hard to hear the repeats. So what we're going to do is, instead of being at every beat, that's what this 500 milliseconds is, let's do it every quarter of a beat and see what that does. So I'm going to run it, and I'm going to bypass just the feedback one, and let's hear the delay time from the beginning and see what that sounds like. So let's put in the other feedback. So we're still decreasing the volume because the default is 0.3. Even if we don't have this effect in here, it still decreases the volume by 0.3. So I'm going to change that. I'm going to do this as a much smaller number. So let's do it as a 0.01. And that way we can really hear the effect just as it repeats. Run this again. Oops, too small. I guess I have to go at least a 1. I can't do 1.1. There we go. So it's got to be at least a 1. Now you can really hear what it would sound like if we didn't decrease the volume of that effect. You can really hear the echo. So let's play with our time again. Instead of being 125, let's go 250, which is every half a beat instead of every quarter beat. And run that. And go back to the original 500 and run that. So you can hear multiple copies of the song are starting over and over again. And we can do this even higher. Let's do twice that, which would be every 2 beats. And we can do every 4 beats. Start. So we have in here, if we count this out, there's 4 beats in here because we're 4/4 time. 4 beats, 4 beats, 4 beats, 4 beats. So 4, 8, 12, 16 beats. The problem is if I make this to be 4,000, that's might be problematic. Start at the beginning. Okay, so let's try upping that number to 8,000. How many beats is that? So you figured it out? It's 16 beats. There's only 16 beats total. What happens if we make this bigger? 10. Uh-oh. If we go bigger than the 16 beats, even if we do 9,000, we get an error. See, the highest this can go is the most number of beats that we have in our measure. So 8's too big. 5's too big. 4 looks like it might be our max. So we can't put in a number that's too high here that goes past the number of beats that we have. Otherwise, we get an out of range error. So you have to be careful with this. Again, this is where that math might come in handy. Figuring out what is the maximum value that you can put in and still be within your measures. So we're going to go back down to 500 and make it sound good. So there you go. By changing these two effects, we can end up having different kinds of sound delays. So let's see what else we can do with delay. So here are the different types of parameters that delay can take. First, we've looked at delay time, which is the time amount in milliseconds that the original track is delayed, and the time between successive repeats of the delay. Then we have delay feedback, which we looked at, is the relative amount of repeats that the delay generates. Higher values create more echoes. Be careful applying too much feedback. So we looked at this. So it goes from 0, -3 is the default value, -120 is the minimum value, and -1 is the maximum value. Same thing here. The default value for a delay time is 300. The minimum value is 0, and the maximum value is 4,000. That's the biggest number that we're allowed to have inside of a delay time, which is why anything above 4,000 wasn't working. It was causing an error. Mix. The percentage of the effect sound that is mixed with the original sound, wet and dry. At the minimum effect, no effect can be heard. At the maximum value, none of the original sound is heard. It's all effect. So we can mix the effect with some type of other sound. Bypass, whether the effect is on or off. If the bypass of the effect is on, that means it's on. And we actually use that. We use the bypass. So sometimes, and we'll figure out later, that sometimes you want to turn the effect on and off, and this is what that does. So this is all the things that delay can do. Delay time, delay feedback, and delay mix and bypass. Those are everything we can do with the delay effect. So now it's your turn. I want you to create your own delay. So choose your own sound, upload and add your own delay to it. You choose whatever you want, add in as many tracks as you want, but you have to delay at least one track. You can delay multiple tracks if you want, and upload both the MP3 and the .py file to the assignment. Good luck, never stop coding.